Hello, everyone. This is another Freedom to Feel conversation, and my guest today is Conrad Lipic. He is a budding therapist and transformational coach, passionate about empowering individuals to embrace doubting transformations. He's also the founder of Mind Aligned. So, this is my very brief introduction of Conrad. The full biography will be at the end of this video. But my main questions for all interviews, for some reason, the initial questions at least, is who are you in your own words, Conrad?
That's a really good question. Over the years, who I am has changed dramatically. My past, not so
Yeah.
much the best person, but I was struggling a lot with post traumatic stress and just
Yeah.
had some really negative coping strategies that I was using. And I
Yeah.
didn't realize how detrimental it was to me personally, but not
Right.
just me, but to other people that I engaged with.
Right.
And so most of the later part of my adult years, I'd say the last 3 years or so, has been a journey of growth, therapy, coaching, spirituality, and
Mm,
just really reforming and reshaping who I am. And
mm,
so at this point, I would say I'm an evolving student that is always learning and trying to make the world a better place than how I left it. So that's how I
yes.
would describe myself at this point.
Yes, I love that. An evolving student. What is the goal? What do you think the goal of that evolution is for all of us, per se, human beings? Or would you say that we all are evolving in our own unique ways?
Yeah, we are all evolving in our own unique ways because what I may like and what I want to do might be completely different for you or
Right.
any of your listeners. And
Yeah.
so we all have our own unique journey. The goal is, and this is a question I really like to ask all my clients is when you die, how do you want to be remembered? And
Yeah.
then what I do is I have
Yeah.
them write their own eulogy speech.
Right.
And I
Huh.
say, get really emotional with it.
Yeah.
Because if you can do that,
Mm.
then you'll know, are you on the right path or are you nowhere close to it?
Yes. Wow, that's beautiful. And what would that speech be for you? With a few, of course, we don't want to go through the whole speech, and
Right.
I know you
Right,
don't have
right,
it in front
right.
of you, but uh, what would that look like for you, comrade?
Yeah. So if I summed it up, it would be
Yeah.
a really great friend, a really great uncle, because I have two
Yeah.
wonderful nieces. So being a
Yeah.
great uncle for them,
Yeah.
just being the type of person that others can look up to and say, he lived a good life.
Yeah.
And also somebody that gives back to their community. And so also being known as a philanthropist
Yeah.
and volunteer.
Yes, that's beautiful. And I see the underlying kind of concept of human connection there. So
Yes.
I see that connecting at a deeper level with people around us, and also with humanity in general, like making some contributions to our life, to people's lives. And that kind of brings me to the topic. Always is the topic of addiction in general.
Mhm.
How do you define addiction? Because I know relationships can become addictive too. So, what
Yeah.
is your definition for addiction?
I mean, addiction is such a broad category. I specialize more in the behavioral aspect of
Yeah.
addictions. So for me, addiction is more a problematic behavior that causes stress, strain, hardship on your personal life, family life, friends,
Yeah.
work, um, like doing things in the community. So anything that impedes those in a negative way
Right.
that you can't stop doing or is difficult, I would say
Right.
that's an addiction.
Yeah. Wow. So, and I know I have read I have interviewed so many people about addiction too, but I have read the book that you suggested.
Mhm.
That was such an interesting topic. The book is titled "Out of the Shadows," and I don't have understanding sexual addiction, and I don't have the author's name here for some reason, but it's easy
Yeah,
to
the
find.
author is Patrick Carnes.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, that really got me thinking about different kinds of addictions and what addiction is, and fundamentally, what is the consequence of being addicted to anything? And that's what you described now. So anything that gets in the way of having a healthy behavior, we are filtering our behaviors, the way we think, the way we view the world and ourselves.
Mhm.
So I would love to ask you already that ending question. What is the process of recovering from addiction? I know that's not an ending question, but I love starting with the end anyway.
Right. Right. And that's not really the ending question either. It's
Right.
how to stay in recovery.
Yeah.
That's more
Mm,
the ending question. But back to your question, so the process, and I also want to add, addiction's also something that we might be taught by our parents, by friends, by society.
yeah.
And so addictions can stem from
Yeah.
those as well.
Right.
Um, but the process of going through addiction, the very first step is always you have to recognize that this is a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you're
Mm,
addicted, if you want to recover, that's the first step. There are many
right.
people that are like, I'm good where I am. What
Yeah.
I'm doing is numbing me out so I don't have to think about the trauma
Yeah.
that I've experienced or how bad my life is.
Right.
And so they're just not ready. And some people are never ready. And
Uh,
that's
uh,
nothing negative about them. It's just, it's a very
mm,
difficult process that not everybody's ready to tackle. And
yeah.
so once you're ready to make that step, it's finding the appropriate person to work with.
Right.
Like therapists, coaches, we all have different specialties. And so let's say you are struggling with sex addiction. I like to call it problematic sexual behaviors. It kind of removes that stigma from it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're not going to want to go to, say, a therapist or a coach who is very general.
Yeah.
They're just a generalist because, yes, they can help with a few things, but they're not really going to help you specifically with what you need.
Right.
And so you're going to want to find a certified sex addiction therapist or a coach that specializes in behavioral addictions. And if you could find one, such as myself, who
Yeah.
works with sexual addictions or problematic sexual behaviors, you are going to have a much better experience and you're much more likely to recover and stay in
Mm,
recovery.
yeah.
And so once you identify a list of individuals, don't go for just one person. Like
Right.
try to find a few, talk to all of them, see who you connect with the best.
Yeah.
Because if you can get that good connection, it's going to be a game changer.
Right.
Once you do that, it's putting in the work.
Mm,
I liken coaching and therapy as kind of a personal trainer in a gym. So
yeah.
you go once a week and you learn some new things, you're held accountable and you learn some insights.
Right.
But it's what you do the other 6 days of the week that really matters.
Mm,
Are you doing the action plans that were
yeah.
assigned to you? Are you making the changes that you have to do? Are
Right.
you switching your mindset? Or are you just not really doing anything and waiting until the next session comes about?
Right.
And so the people who really are in it to make the change will put in that energy and effort to make those correcting behaviors and do what's needed.
Yes, that's a very good point about doing the work at the gym. The following the example you just gave you, it's just one thing, but then we have to do so many other things in order to get the
Mhm.
results that we want. That makes so much sense. Question, curiosity.
Sure.
Why did you choose this area, specific area of
Yeah,
sexual addiction, sex addiction, or sexual problematic behaviors?
sure. So I was in the military back in 2003 to 2007. and spent 2005 to 2006 in Iraq with the 101st Airborne.
Wow.
I was a combat medic at the time, so I saw more than a lot of people and less than some,
Yeah.
but I still saw enough that when I came back, our first sergeant said, "Hey, if anyone talks to mental health and says you have any issues, no one's going on vacation. So you can just shut up and, not say anything."
Mm.
And so that led to about 12 years, I would say, 12 to 15, yeah, 12 years, 10 to 12 years of problematic sexual behaviors for myself.
Yeah.
And I thought of it as, well, I'm not drinking or doing drugs, so I'm in control because if I
Mm.
drink or do drugs, I'm going to be out of control. And, I want to keep that control. But
Right.
what I didn't realize is I was still very much out of control and it was ruining my life and my relationships.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
having that in my history and working, and it's still a work in progress,
Yeah.
it's being able to help people and know where they come from and be able to identify it from a personal perspective
Right. Right.
makes it so much easier.
Yeah.
Now, I don't disclose much to my clients
Yeah.
because it's not really going to help with their
Right.
recovery process,
Right.
but being able to just get a little bit of information from them and then extrapolating from both my experiences and other clients' experiences to really build that picture and
Right.
then present it to them and say, okay, this is what I'm hearing. Is that accurate or am I off the mark?
Right.
And then that allows the client to really say, oh, yeah, that is accurate. Or no, you said this, but really it's that.
Right.
And so then it helps to build more of a connection and also put things on the correct path.
Yeah, it really makes sense to me. Trust is everything, isn't it, when it comes
Yes.
to human relationships, but especially in the area that you are specializing in,
Hmm.
therapy and especially sex addiction, because or problematic sexual behavior, as you call it,
Hmm.
because then it feels very, very intimate and very secretive. So and there's a lot of shame. I'm sure there's a lot of
Hmm.
shame and a lot of uh, guilt behind that. So
Hmm.
it's not easy. That's beautiful, Conrad. Yeah, thank you for doing that.
Yes, you're welcome.
Off record, I have deep devotion for anything that has to do with healing, and I know where it's coming from, where uh, my own life experiences with trauma, all kinds of traumas when I was very
Hmm.
young, and then I noticed that for some reason I didn't detach from the body mind issues, let's say even addictions. Lots of them
Hmm.
will connect to it, and one of them, I would say, it was love addiction. I don't think it was sex
Yes.
addiction, but sex love addiction.
Yep.
So, and then now it's like it became a lot more playful in a sense. Like I'm married, and I can see that play of the body mind, the defined by trauma, still coming in from time to time. They're still dancing, still around here, but there's something about this deep understanding, this knowledge that I'm not the body mind that just makes so much, like I said, playful, and it's
Hmm.
lighter, that much lighter. So with that said, what is the difference between sex addiction and love addiction?
Sure. So sex is more the physical act of it. The maybe it is going out and going out and finding sexual conquests now has kind of morphed into using dating apps. So
Yeah,
technology has really shifted the way
yeah,
sex addiction or problematic sexual behaviors
yeah,
is these days. It's also going online looking at pornography, paying for content on, say, OnlyFans, Facebook, Twitter,
yeah,
any of those places. Or even going to websites where you pay per email to talk to somebody and have just conversations that are inappropriate, especially since most people are married or in relationships that do those.
yeah, yeah,
And
Wow.
So sex addiction is more about the sexual aspect, the desire
Mhm.
of sex, basically. Now,
Yeah.
love addiction, on the other hand, can have sex addiction added to it,
Right.
but it's its own separate thing in a way, because love is more, you are wanting to, like, for a lot of people, they're single when they have love addiction, or they're in a relationship and they are looking for something else.
Yeah.
Basically, it is when you're single, it's saying, all right, I'm worthless and nobody loves me if I'm not
Mm.
in a relationship. And so then they try to jump into a
Mm.
relationship really quickly. And then
Yeah.
when they're in the relationship, they're like, oh, this isn't for me. I miss that, what's called the NRE, the new relationship energy. They're like, I really miss that. And I no
Yeah.
longer have it with this person.
Right.
So then they start looking for somebody else without their significant other knowing. And then
Yeah.
they develop that NRE with that new person and jump ship to
Wow.
a new relationship. And it's just that continuous cycle.
Wow. Yes. I could see that within not getting into details, but yeah, I could see that
Mhm,
being the case. How fascinating it is, like Conrad, when we're able to, like you said, off could look at ourselves honestly, and say,
mhm,
wow, this is happening. That's like the recognition of the problem. That's the first step, as you said, in recovery. Like in my case, it was really of course, I was seeing all these issues, all the behavior issues, and trying to go from one relationship to another, although they would last a long time and was never faithful in any relationship. But
mhm,
they will be very yeah, there was this sense of dissatisfaction of not being in a relationship to try to feel loved and saved, but knowing that that was not really the source for it, and
mhm.
kind of trying to get out of it, not knowing how, and then yeah, and then the next step would be looking for somebody else. Which yeah,
Yeah.
that's really sad, isn't it? When I think about it, it's almost like it's a past for me now. When I look, the other day I looked at a scar in my body somewhere, and I remember kind of looking at it and saying, "Where did I get this scar? I don't remember. I don't have the memories of it."
Yeah.
So it feels like that. I could see the
Mhm.
scar, but I don't have the memories anymore. Although when I have conversations like this, they come up, but in a very light way again. So what is your idea of spirituality? How do you see
Sure.
yourself in the world from the spirit, from a spiritual perspective?
Sure. So the way I see it, I call myself a spiritual atheist.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
don't really go along the lines of religious dogma. But
Yeah.
what I do believe is the energy of the universe. We are
Yeah.
all connected to each other through
Right.
energy.
Right.
And even when we die, our body decomposes, goes into the soil, and then
Right.
it, you know, feeds the animals,
Mm,
feeds the grass, and then it continues the cycle there. And so our energy just changes. But we're also connected not just to each other, but also to inanimate objects. And so science has
mm,
even shown that inanimate objects are not still, they're not,
mm.
like, not moving on a molecular level, they're
Right.
still moving.
Yeah.
And so we're connected to that energy.
Yeah.
And the way I see it is, if we have a good relationship with ourselves, our
Mm,
energy is more pure and we're able to give it to more people
yeah.
and experience the world in a different place. For
Mm,
me, I love to go out hiking in the woods,
yeah.
and I usually like going alone because then I could just let my mind wander. I
Right.
can feel nature, enjoy
Yeah.
the sights, the sounds, the animals, and it
Yeah.
just really helps me reconnect with not only nature but myself,
Yeah.
so that when I finish the hike, I have a really nice sense of accomplishment and a sense of peace. And
Yes.
so that's really where my spirituality is
Mm.
that connection.
The spiritual understandings I have, they're a little bit, they go really deep into a lot of things. They are not religious, but they are. It's a religion. It is a spiritual philosophy from India. It's called Advaita Vedanta. I'm not sure if you heard about it, but
I
it's
have
about
not.
it's non-duality. It's basically what you said. Everything is connected, but they go deeper into one reality. There's just one thing, or not even a thing, non-thing
Mhm,
here. They would put in simple words, and that. sounds kind of might sound religious, but it's not. There's only God.
Right.
So that would kind of, if the mind cannot get that, because a lot of people unfortunately don't love themselves, so they
Hmm.
don't really, or don't love, if they don't love themselves, then they don't love anything else, so they have a hard time kind of knowing, think, even the thought of that they are God. It's not, I mean, most people cannot conceive,
Right.
but that basically
I
that's what
I
it is.
agree completely.
You
Right.
do, right? Yeah.
'Cause yes, because
Yeah.
in our world, we
Uh-huh.
are God, and it's not trying to minimize somebody who's religious that believes
Right.
in a higher power,
Yes.
but we are the God over our own
Mm.
world.
Mm.
And everybody else that is in our world is basically
Uh,
they're extras in our story, just like
yeah.
we're extras in their stories.
Right. Right.
And yeah, I
Mm.
just really
Yeah.
love that thinking. And I'm glad you brought that up because that is
Yeah.
completely how I agree.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And
Yeah.
it's extremely deep. Once we get to apply that knowledge in daily life, it's just incredible. It becomes
Mhm.
it's I would describe the feeling as peace, as
Yes.
happiness, joy, peace. It's easier to feel at peace within the, the chaotic complexity of body mind, because
Yeah.
it's here. We cannot say that we are God, but at the same time ignore, deny the body, the
Right.
body and what it does and what it wants, and the mind. But there is a sense of there's a sense of detachment, but not
Mhm.
disengagement. We're still engaged,
Right.
but it feels different. It's so, I mean, I
It does.
guess, yeah, it's a practice, I guess. Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it really is a different feeling. So it's that peaceful feeling where you do have happiness, joy, excitement, but it's not to the point where somebody who's not in that same state is. So maybe uh, somebody gets really excited and happy and they're up here, but
yeah,
you get happy and excited and you're here. It's more
yeah.
acknowledging that it has or that it's there and enjoying the feeling for what it is
Mm,
instead of letting it
mm,
overcome you. And
yeah,
so I found the more that I practice
yeah,
this way of thinking and this way of living, my highs aren't as high and my lows aren't as low, but
yeah.
I'm able to experience them longer. And it's a much, as you said, different, but more enjoyable feeling.
Yes, right. And maybe also because there's a sense of freedom. So it's a joy, a sense of inner peace or happiness that's not connected to things. So
Hmm.
even if the body's not feeling well, I still can be joyful. I still can have that sense of peace here.
Right.
When things are not going right with the business, I don't have enough money, whatever it is, then the sense of peace is still there. So it's not
Hmm.
really it's not dependent on anything that's external. So it's like you said, it's almost stands on its own. It's like the sense of peace
Hmm.
that's fundamentally what we are. It's not even who, but what. So what is the role? I think I mentioned that earlier, belief system. So I
Hmm.
did mention that because I read in the book, in this book they suggested. But
Yeah,
talk to me about the role of belief system. What the role it plays in addiction.
sure.
Yes, what's the role of belief system in addiction?
Sure. So when somebody has a problematic behavior of any sort, an addiction of any sort, their belief system is usually very me centered,
Yeah.
where it's, I deserve this. Maybe it's, I came home and had a really rough day from work. So I deserve to go and look at porn instead of talking to my wife.
Yeah.
Or they're like, nobody's getting hurt by this. So it's all right behavior.
Mm,
It's very me centric.
yeah.
And what they
Uh,
don't realize is, well, it does hurt your wife. And I'm just
mm,
using the male
yeah.
client because that's typically
Yeah.
who I work with, but it can also be the other way around.
Yeah.
Um, and their behaviors do have an impact on others. Maybe they're missing their kids' sporting events.
Yeah.
Maybe they're missing going out with friends. Uh, I've had clients who have missed anniversaries to go act out. So it is harming other people. They
Wow.
just don't see it. And in recovery, changing that belief system to say, hey, my behaviors do have an impact on others, not just myself,
Right.
then they're able to see, a much different relationship with their family, friends, their spouse, or significant other if they're not married.
Right.
And so that really
Wow.
shifts from the me perspective
Yeah.
to the we perspective.
Mm,
And it's not saying that they're ignoring the me,
yeah.
but they're more aware of the we, and their behavior becomes more of, well, how can I improve my
Mm,
relationship with X person?
right.
And then that way it helps get them out of that destructive mindset that they were in
Right.
and really focus on being a better person, which is what they ultimately want. Like I have
Mm,
not had one person
mm.
come to me that says, no, I still want to be, an asshole when, I
Yes.
get
Right.
better.
Right. Right.
Like
Right.
not one.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really helping them shift
Yeah.
that
Uh,
mindset.
wow. So it's integrating. It's not like you said. It's not really forgetting about the me, but integrating the me with we, with others. It's
Hmm.
that sounds beautiful, and it would be amazing if we can actually lose that sense of self. The more we lose the sense of self, the more we automatically integrate with others.
Hmm.
It's easier to just kind of let's say, connect. It has been my
Yes.
experience, even with my husband too, and people in my family. It's so much easier. So, something that I read in the book. So, the book, again, the title that you have suggested is Out of the Shadows. And
Hmm.
there it says, our belief system is the filter through which we conduct the main task of our lives, making choices. So, that's from where we make choices. And you just mentioned that as well. There's something else that caught my attention. It says, an essential part of sanity is being grounded in reality. So, in the sense that addicts distort and deny reality, the sexual addiction becomes a form of insanity.
Hmm.
Talk to me about that. So, sanity, insanity, that made sense to me. That's why I have Hugh like really highlighted black because distorting the reality, right? That
Yes.
made sense. But
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your perspective on this. Do you agree with this definition of
Oh,
sanity?
completely. Yes. A lot of problematic sexual behaviors, we have this warped sense of entitlement, this warped
Yeah.
sense of I'm not harming anybody, or like I said earlier, it's I deserve this. I mean, there's so much that goes on, and that's not even all of it. That's just one aspect.
Right.
But what we do is we convince ourselves that what we're doing is okay. And that's the filter that we see things through. So
Uh,
he's very much right in how he
yeah.
wrote that. And honestly, I could not like phrase that any better than he did there.
Right.
And it's learning to overcome our viewpoint and enter into what reality is because we don't live in
Mm,
reality. A
uh,
lot of people with problematic sexual
yeah.
behaviors and other addictions,
Yeah.
they isolate.
Yeah.
They
Right.
hide from people. Even if they live with someone, they have a certain room or they sit in a certain chair so that they can hide their phone.
Uh,
They really isolate themselves and they lose that connection, which we've talked about.
yeah.
And so the biggest part of getting grounded with reality is building those connections, getting out of the house, going and doing a healthy activity where you could meet people.
Yeah.
And then that right there helps insanity become sanity.
Yes, right. Because there's no longer the denial or distortion of reality. And then,
Right.
because I heard it a lot about this, the power of human connection to
Hmm.
dispel addiction, which
Hmm.
is wonderful. And I do have, I think yeah, my husband's friend, he was addicted to alcohol. So he belongs to
Hmm.
this AA meeting, has been
Yep.
there for years now.
Yeah.
and and I see that he's doing much better, of course, for the last 25 years.
Hmm.
He's not drinking or anything like that. But then I see his behavior. He has it's almost addictive behaviors. I see
Hmm.
cigarettes now. He smokes. So my concern with the not kind of healing the root of the problem is that people with this very serious form of addiction will
Hmm.
kind of replace the addiction. Let's say
Yep.
it's sex now, and there will be food, and there will be relationships, and there will be something else. So what will be the core, Conrad? How do they change their belief system that they are worth, that they, basically to me, it's just self love, just going
Right.
within, isn't it?
It's a lot deeper than that.
Uh,
So we call it in therapy, we call it substitution addiction. You
yeah,
substitute one habit for another.
right.
It's interesting you brought food up. Most people don't realize that food is
Yeah,
a coping technique and not
yeah,
always a good one.
right.
Um, but what you really have to do is you have to look at the root cause of, well, why are you acting out?
Mm,
What's the reason for it?
yeah.
And really address the root cause. A lot of what I see um, is trauma.
Mm,
Maybe someone was molested as a child. Maybe they had been made fun of a lot because of their weight.
yeah,
Maybe it was they came from a lower socioeconomic status, and then they grew up and they became attractive, and so they just bounced around because no one wanted them when they were
right,
younger, and
right.
now they can be who they wanted to be, but in an unhealthy way.
Yeah.
But it's also good to note that our human brains are hardwired for addiction because of
uh,
dopamine and serotonin. So it's not surprising that people jump from one to another.
right.
Even people that
Yeah.
are like, hey, I don't do drugs, or maybe they're like, I just do a little weed and a little drinking here and there.
Yeah.
Uh, but there's other things. Maybe
Mm.
it is online shopping on Amazon, that.
Even work, right, Conrad? Sorry to
Right.
interrupt. Yeah,
Even no, you're good. Even work. So people throw themselves into work to just avoid what's going on.
yeah.
I've known people that throw themselves into working out to the point where it's
Mm,
extremely
yeah,
unhealthy for them.
yeah,
I mean, there's so many different things we can be addicted to.
right,
And because of that dopamine release, we just want that over and over and over.
right.
And it's also
Wow.
why it's so easy once we identify a certain habit or behavior with that dopamine release that down the road, doing that same behavior can cause a resurgence. How they
Mm,
say, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, because, 5, 10 years
yeah,
down the road, if they start drinking, they may just go right back into past
right,
behaviors.
right.
Now, what makes
Uh,
behavioral addictions interesting over substance addictions, especially problematic sexual behaviors? You can't not be sexual the rest of your life. So, like a 25-year-old
yeah.
who comes and says, hey, I'm struggling with, sex addiction. I masturbate to porn every day.
Yeah.
We'll use that example. Well, I'm not going to say you can't masturbate the rest of your life,
Yeah.
but you have to have a healthy relationship with it. No more porn use. And you have to start
Mm,
learning to masturbate for the sensation, not
mm,
for the escape mechanism, which is a lot of
mm,
times what they're doing. And so it's relearning behaviors when it comes to
mm.
behavioral addictions. It's relearning those behaviors
Wow.
that really helps overcome that aspect, and then coupled with working on the root causes. And
Yeah,
so coaching and therapy, I love doing both of these with my clients because
yeah,
it it really hits everything from a lot of different perspectives. I even bring up the spirituality aspect.
yeah.
I bring up, are you working out? Are you engaged with people
Mm,
outside of the home?
yeah,
How's your work life? Really hitting a bunch of different areas because
yeah.
we're all deficient in one area. And
Mm,
it doesn't matter what area or who you are, you have a deficiency because we put more of our effort into maybe one or two areas at the expense of maybe spirituality, maybe work.
yeah.
Um,
Mm,
and then it's like, oh, well, now I have to put energy into this, but then you take it away from, let's say, your physical attributes, like working out, how well you eat, what you drink, things like that.
yeah.
And so it's just a constant balancing act, is what it
Ah,
is.
yeah. So balance is the key.
Yes.
Yeah, that resonates true to me. Even in the sense, so I phrase it differently, I guess. I always think about attention. So addiction
Mm.
sounds to me like obsession. You're just
Oh,
so
yes.
focused on one thing that you keep
Mhm.
repeating the same thing. It's almost like childlike and always
Mhm.
trying different things. So not really obsessed with anything in
Yeah.
particular. And that creates, in a sense, also that sense of balance. I noticed that too. Working out a little
Yeah.
bit, although I do a workout with my husband, and he lifts really heavy, and I tend to lift heavy too because of being around him. Maybe he's
Right.
addicted to it. And then we go probably a little bit a little bit over there, but not as we used to be. I used to be a fitness
Mhm.
trainer and a competitor, and him doing his thing too. So yes, you're right. It was really easy to get addicted, obsessed with that.
Right.
Now I see more like a fun thing. I go to the gym. I stopped going for years, and then afraid to become addicted to it again. And then I wanted to try it, and then now it feels like fun because I put my music on really loud.
Yeah.
That it's I almost want to dance around the gym. Really,
Right.
is that how you measure in a way? That's how you. I mean, I know that's not how you talk to your clients, but yeah, how do you measure?
Right. So in a way, yes. In a way, no.
Yeah.
Just because you can go a day, a week, a month without doing something doesn't mean that it's
Oh,
not an addiction.
oh wow.
I've had clients who have gone 2 months without doing stuff, and then they relapse and they're right back into
Oh,
that cycle.
wow.
So in a way,
Mm,
yes. In a way, no.
right.
But if you can go for a prolonged period of time and not feel that urge, that craving of, oh, I have to do this,
Yeah, right, right.
you're
Yeah.
m- potentially not addicted to it, but
Yeah.
not necessarily because even addicts can go, for
Oh,
brief periods of time and be like, oh, I'm good. I don't need to do that.
yeah.
But then it really just
Mm.
kicks in. So
Yeah, I
take it
like
with
the
a
way you
grain of
say.
salt.
Yeah, you're very cautious about making it black or white, right? It's really,
Right.
yeah, we don't know for sure. Wow, so is that tricky? Addiction. It's
Yeah.
very interesting. So I just mentioned the word obsession. Is that the same
Mhm.
thing? Do you see addiction and obsession being the same, or
Oh,
they are?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's the obsession of chasing that initial high or getting the high back.
Yeah.
So we'll just stick with problematic sexual behavior since that's the topic today. Imagine somebody who, um, let's just say, doesn't have a lot of sex in their early 20s. And then all of a sudden, they get a lot of money and they start getting promotions and they hit a certain status. And so now they're being looked at a lot more by women. And so they start to engage in a lot more behavior because they're like, oh, okay, I deserve this and I can do this now, but they can't stop that behavior because they don't want to end up like they used to be in their early 20s, teens, and
Right.
prior to. Or maybe this one might resonate with some of your client or with some of your listeners. It's porn use. Someone may be like, okay, yeah, I started with, just your basic porn. We'll just go with a heteronormative individual, one guy, one girl, and then that gets boring for them. So then they have to go to
Mm,
something more, maybe a threesome, and then that gets boring. And so then they keep
wow.
going and going.
Wow.
And that's how, some people end up getting into some very
Yeah.
illegal activity. It's not
Mm,
because they want to do it,
mm,
but because when that obsession kicks in, they need to find something that works because everything before that no longer works. And so they're obsessed with finding that new material that
yeah.
works.
Wow, that is sad, isn't it?
Mhm.
Super sad to hear. So is a relationship with a chemical, with a feeling. It's not really like I read it says, I mean, I that really kind of stopped me. So it says here in the book, it said, uh, yeah, it says here, they believe they sex addicts they believe that sex is their most important need. If you do not trust people, one thing that is true about sex and alcohol, food, gambling, and risk is that it always does what it promises for a moment.
Mhm.
The
For a moment.
relationship, yeah, right. The relationship is with sex or with the substance, whatever it is, and
Mhm.
now with people. So
Correct.
it's that. with the substance, with the chemical, with the sensation. Um, you see, Comrade, I have to say it, that always goes back to the belief that we are the body mind, and that's why I think there's this huge focus. Whatever the body's asking, or the chemicals in the brain's asking us to do, of course, then we would follow
Right.
that path, because that's what we believe we are, that we are just the body and the mind. But then for me, what really I had to find something like a path that it would kind of make me see clearly that I was not the body mind. And then I found that's
Right.
Vedanta non-duality. It was very clear for me. And that's when, and I know they use that in AA too. They do use the religious spirituality aspect. And that,
All 12 step groups do. Yes.
oh, they do, right? Yeah, it
Yeah.
helps a lot because it has to do with a belief system, which is
Hmm.
it's something that's it's let's say it's not physical, it's non-physical. So what is non-physical is spirituality. That's what the
Right.
focus is, the spirit. So the mind and the spirit to me, in that sense, is one and the same, non-physical. And that's why I think when I talk to therapists and I see the work you do, it's very much spiritual to me. Because like, wait a minute, we are talking about the same thing here,
Right.
non-physical, right?
We
And
talk about the same thing just in different ways.
right,
And we
right,
look at, like, so the difference between therapy and coaching is, there's a lot of overlap, but the
yeah,
therapists work more on okay, let's look at the mental health. How is your mental health?
right,
And so it's very mentally focused.
yeah,
Whereas coaching doesn't so much go off the mental health, because a coach is not going to say, oh, congrats, you have major depression disorder, or you have bipolar 1 disorder. They're not
yeah,
going to do anything like that. And so they're able to step back a little further to give a lot more of that spirituality aspect that's
mm,
not necessarily always in therapy,
right,
but still in therapy, you can have that aspect.
right,
It's just talk. So the mind, you know, connects with your spirituality, because
mm,
from the mind, that's where we sense everything.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
therapists look
mm,
at it more from that scientific aspect, and
yeah,
coaches look at it more from a connection aspect.
mm,
And both of those can have, as you said, the spiritual aspect to it. It's just really, how is it delivered and who is the individual doing it? Because you could have therapists that
yeah,
just 100% do, okay, this is therapy, therapy,
yeah,
therapy, this is science, this is evidence
yeah,
based. It's
yeah,
like, okay, you're hitting one aspect, but you're not being holistic. You're not hitting all the different
mm,
aspects of it.
yeah,
And you find some therapists that are like, well, we're only going to do this one type of therapy. We're not going to do anything else. And they're so pigeonholed into, well, if this doesn't work, then there's something wrong with you.
oh,
And that's the
yeah,
complete wrong way to be. You should
yeah,
have, kind of
mm,
like Batman's tool belt, you should have a
mm,
lot of knowledge in
mm,
different areas and say,
yeah,
oh, for this,
yeah.
here, this will work.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
That's why you're a coach as well. I love that. You see the flexibility, this dance, right, between science and
Yeah.
spirituality.
Yeah.
That's the reason why I'm a student of Vedanta non-duality, because it is the science of spirituality. So we're almost at the end, Comrade. It has been wonderful to talk to you. I do have
It's
some
been
more.
wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you have the coaching and the therapy together, because that means you're more flexible to bring
Mhm.
those spiritual aspects. And then there's something else that I read. Let me see. Oh yeah. So the book again, Out of the Shadows. We're promoting the book. I know you didn't write the book. I wish you did. You had written that book. Ah, but
I don't know if I can improve on that book.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
kind of the cornerstone.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, caught my attention in so many aspects. But there was a book review. Somebody wrote comments about the book, and that caught my attention too. The person, he or she, said, "This book shows us that most sex addicts hate themselves. They
Oh
hate
yeah.
what they do. They cannot believe how much their mind craves it. Every time they act out, they resolve never to do it again," as you said before. But what caught my attention, I mean, more than anything, it was about the hating themselves.
Yep.
So that's at the core. It seems to me, from what I read, is that something that you also that you agree with, that the foundation of addiction is self-hatred?
Very much so. I 100% agree with that. It's not having a self love.
Yeah.
Like within the first session, coaching or therapy, I can always get a good sense of, does the person truly love themselves, or are they putting on a front?
Mm.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say I can't remember one client that actually loved themselves when it came to this topic.
Yeah.
Um, it's a lot of self-loathing, loathing. Sorry, tongue
Yeah.
tied there,
Yeah.
and just not really having a sense of, you know, peace with who they are.
Mm.
Not liking, maybe
Yeah.
they don't like
Yeah.
how they look. They don't like
Yeah.
where they're from, um, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a lot of just self-loathing and hatred, or just they're really sad about themselves, and they're like, I should have been in a different place in my life at this point,
Yeah.
and just yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot of that.
Yeah. You see that when I read that, kind of it stopped me for a moment, because then you start thinking about your own self, the way
Mhm.
we behave, and then is that connected to self hatred? And then you see people around you, my family members, my friends, like, and that's it's a sad kind of conclusion to make, that most of us don't love us. We don't love
Mhm.
ourselves. We reject ourselves. We
Mhm.
It's very easy to not accept ourselves, and we even
Mhm.
go, some of us, was my case, going to the extent of loving, trying to love others before I loved myself,
Mhm.
in the attempt of, oh, maybe if I love this person. I mean, that was not love, because love, it's, you have to love yourself first in order to really
Right.
understand what love is, right? Which to me
Right.
is a lot much, is a broad thing. It seems
And
like
if you
common sense, right, Comrade? It's common sense to
yeah,
love yourself.
it seems like it, but it's really difficult to do. And if you look at it, a lot of it is really our perception
Yeah.
of how other people view us. It's
Right.
not our perception of reality. It's
Mm,
not it's
yeah.
not our thinking. It's,
Yeah.
oh, well, they're not going to like me because this,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
oh, they gave me that look, so it
Yeah.
means this.
Yes.
And so
Mm,
now I don't like myself because that person doesn't like me, even though they're
wow.
just a stranger and I only saw them for, 5 seconds.
Right.
And so a lot of
Right.
not loving ourselves is based upon, how we view things. Or, I mean, a lot of it is also, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but there's a good amount that's also Hollywood based.
Ah,
Oh, I don't look
yeah.
like that
Yeah.
individual.
Yeah.
And it's not just women, it's guys. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't look like Chris Hemsworth as Thor. And,
Yeah.
so,
Mm,
uh, I mean, it's very superficial. And a lot
yeah.
of not loving ourselves is very superficial.
Right. Yeah. That I never heard it that way. That's insightful. Superficial, which means the interpretation that I would kind of go to right away is like living for the outside, the external world.
Yeah.
It's not, we're not in touch with our own hearts and our own inner
Right.
world. That is sad. And I don't know why I say sad, because I see that that's the reality for a lot of
Hmm.
people, a lot of human beings. And
Yeah.
it was my reality too. I guess it kind of comes back, a memory of that, and then makes me sad for a moment. How come? How
Hmm.
I didn't love myself before or accepted
Right.
myself? I love myself and accept myself, but I still do my hair, but I still put makeup on. And it's
Right.
not for other people, but it's just it could be, who knows? But that's something that's in the past. It's not a belief system that's here anymore. It's almost like, I think the analogy that I like to use is like, going on a bike really, really fast, and then you jump out of the bicycle, and the bicycle is still rolling, still moving.
Hmm.
There's a gap between the body, mind, and consciousness, which is what I
Hmm.
call it, and also the ah, and then you go distance enough to just kind of know that you're not the body mind, but then you go back to it, and then you integrate, you go the consciousness. I mean, consciousness, God is that it's
Hmm.
everything, cannot be separated anyway. So it's this amazing dance between giving that distance to see the body mind in its behavior, and then to know that's not you, and then going
Mhm.
back to it and still knowing that that's not you. And that goes back to that question about freedom. I had that initial
Mhm.
question for you. What is freedom to you, Conrad, to end the conversation?
Sure. Um, Freedom is knowing that we have these aspects of ourselves, but not letting them take over.
Mm,
It's
yeah,
being at peace with it, saying, all right, that is part of me. And I accept
mm,
that, but I don't have to engage in that.
right.
And from there, being able to live the life that you want,
Mm,
that right there is freedom.
yeah, I love that you mentioned the word peace, right? Peace is always
Mhm.
there. Never losing contact because it's essentially who we are. Peace,
Mhm.
freedom itself, happiness, joy, love. So how can we lose contact with it? We have to be, in a
Right.
way, in denial of reality. That's why I love that aspect of the this understanding, the psychological understanding about addiction, the denial distortion of reality. So once you know you are peace itself, you are, I mean, from the spiritual perspective, and you are love and you are joy, that's it. You can't lose yourself. It's impossible because you're like, oh, that's who I am. So you always go back to it. I mean, immediately, it could take a second, but you
Mhm.
return to it. We can get distorted for a moment, but then it goes back.
Mhm.
It's just fascinating. Thank you so much for this amazing conversation. I mean, I love talking about these things. Of
You're
course.
welcome. Thank
Yeah,
you for
thank
having me
you.
on.
And before we say goodbye for today, I have this. Yeah, I have a technical question. Where's the best place to find more information about you and your work?
Sure. So if you go to www.mindaligned.com, then that'll take you to my company's webpage. And from there, you could look at coaching or therapy services. Each have their own unique page. So you can just find that from the company's website and get more information that way.
Wonderful. I'll have the link on the video profile. Thank you so much again for your presence, and we'll talk soon. Bye for now,
Sounds good.
Conrad. Thank you.